What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we're going to be talking about New Mutants number 25 by Vita, Yala, and Rod Race. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how Vita and Rod are bringing back a plot point from a classic Chris Claremont, John Buscema, and Tom Palmer story arc. We're also going to talk about who the mysterious, shadowy figure could possibly be, who is manipulating things behind the scenes in Limbo. And we're also going to talk about why Magik is handing over the throne of Limbo to Madelyne Pryor. We're gonna talk about all this and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
The first thing I want to talk about is what is up with this story. So for those who are not familiar, this story is almost like a spiritual sequel to a story arc from back around roughly 1983, 1984. This was a story arc by Chris Claremont, John Buscema, and Tom Palmer called Magik, Storm and Illyana, number 1 through 4. It was a limited series that basically chronicled the time that Magik, or Illyana, at that time was in Limbo, being held against her will by the demon Belasco. This issue does a lot of callbacks to that story, bringing back characters like Cat, who was the Limbo version of Kitty Pryde, or Kate Pryde as we know her today, Shadow Cat. She was even kind of turned into more of a cat-like creature. We even get nods towards the ultimate fates of the Limbo versions of Colossus, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, so on and so forth. We even get a little nod towards characters like Storm, who also factored, as you would maybe imagine based on the name of that original story arc, that she factored very heavily into Illyana's time in Limbo. So now that we've set the table for all that, the thing that people probably really want to know is what is up with the shadowy figure who is, for all intents and purposes, manipulating the demon Sim to go after Magik and try to, dethrone her and take the crown of Limbo. That character, I think, is pretty obvious who it could be. There's one of two possibilities, maybe even three possibilities, but one is incredibly more obvious than the others. The smart money, I'm gonna go ahead and say right now, is gonna be that it's Belasco. The shadowy figure has Belasco's profile. It's very similar, even though technically they're incredibly overshadowed. They do kind of strike a figure that's very similar to how we've seen Belasco in the past. Another thing I would say too is that I've even wondered if maybe this is some alternate Limbo version of Magik. Maybe this is Magik's darker primal Limbo urges given shape in Limbo separate from her own entity, though I think that is kind of a little bit of a reach. I also even wondered if maybe this is the Limbo version of Storm, though I don't think that is the case either, considering when the story arc takes place and all that entails. Not to mention that version of the character was killed off, but when has death ever stopped anyone from making a return in comics? But still, I don't think it's either of those. I think Belasco, the smart money is on Belasco. But whatever the case is, Belasco has leveled up Sim, giving him some extra special abilities that are going to allow him to take the fight to Magik as well as the rest of the New Mutants, more specifically characters like Mirage and Wolfsbane. And speaking of those characters, because we'll come back to Sim and what he's doing for Belasco in a minute, one of the other questions I think a lot of people are trying to figure out is why the hell is Magik handing over the keys to the kingdom to Madelyne Pryor, a woman who is known to, well, I know a lot of people don't like to use the word crazy, but let's just go ahead and call a spade a spade. This woman is crazier than cat shit. It just is what it is. She has been through the ringer. She is probably one of the most mentally and emotionally unstable characters in the history of Marvel Comics. She went from believing that she was a real person to realizing that she was a clone created by Mr. Sinister to manipulate Cyclops, and became this twisted and immoral creature known as the Goblin Queen, and basically was the entire focal point of a whole ass X-Men crossover that you may or may not have heard of called Inferno. She manipulated Havoc. She tried to invade the realm of Earth by merging it with Limbo. She literally planned a whole takeover of the planet with a hellish realm. It doesn't get much more evil than that, and though in recent memory, she has slowly but surely been proven that she is not necessarily as evil as maybe some people might think. She's just a twisted person who is only a product of how she was created. That said, Krakoa is all about second chances, and there is some interesting commentary brought up in this issue. As I just said, one of the most important points that's brought up, and this is even by Madelyne Pryor herself, is that you gave power to the man who created Madelyne Pryor, manipulated her, turned her into the monster that she ultimately became, and you've given him power, you propped him up, you've made him one of the most important people on the island. Why can't she get the same respect? Basically calling out the fact that Krakoa's promise is not for everyone, and that's something that I think Vita Ayala has tackled on multiple occasions across their time working this series, bringing up the fact that some people aren't as equal on the island as others. This is a thread that's actually come up in some other X books that we've talked about recently. Sinister has been given a chance, even though people know they shouldn't trust him, and I've even said this as well, and it's definitely become more obvious as of late if you've been keeping up with Immortal X-Men or just X-Men proper. In Hellions, we saw how this guy was with the shits, and we know from our previous dealings with Sinister back, going across, the previous decades of X-Men comics, he's not to be trusted, and yet, even though technically the Quiet Council doesn't trust him, he's still tolerated in ways that Madelyne Pryor wasn't given the same opportunity to be tolerated. Going back to Hellions, constantly came up that Madelyne Pryor was not worthy of resurrection, that she would not be resurrected because it would cause too many problems. Now, of course, some of those problems are because, well, for one, she is a clone of Jean Grey, and she caused a lot of problems for the X-Men. Also, there's issues between Jean Grey and Cyclops regarding Madelyne Pryor, but the main idea was that, oh, no clones can be, resurrected. That was kind of the excuse that they gave, but the truth of the matter is they just didn't want to bring her back. They feared the level of power that she could bring, and honestly, you can kind of understand why. We just recently saw in Immortal X-Men that the X-Men are not prepared to deal with major magical threats on Krakoa. That was proven with the character Selene. Selene unleashed a magic kaiju on the island and had the entire island nation in disrepair. What would they do if Madelyne Pryor somehow decided that she wanted to focus her attention on Krakoa, which technically in Hellions, she was already plotting to burn the island down? That said, Madelyne is not as evil as some people may want to believe that she is. She does actually want to be better, and while yes, it is also been proven, she still has some wires crossed in there somewhere. We saw this in the final issues of Hellions as well as the previous issue of New Mutants. Yeah, there is still something in there. She still has some of that evil within her, but as Magik notices, she's not just that. She's been manipulated to become the evil thing, the evil creature, this monster that everyone sees her as, and that she does have the capacity to do good if she's actually given the chance. We've given Apocalypse this chance. Hell, they gave Selene this chance, and look what she just recently did. They gave Sabretooth a chance, and look what he did with his chance. For characters like, once again, Mr. Sinister, Sebastian Shaw, all of these characters have been given another opportunity. We saw this recently with the character Shadow King, or rather Amal Farouk, who was possessed by the Shadow King. Krakoa is a place of second chances, so if we're gonna give second chances to some of the worst enemies the X-Men have ever faced, then Madelyne definitely deserves a shot. Now, giving her the Throne of Hell does kind of seem like a bit of a stretch, right out of the gate. I feel like you should definitely maybe take baby steps, before we just go whole hog in on, just giving her a second chance. I mean, there's second chances, and then there's giving people second chances, with a Ferrari or a Corvette attached to it. You're setting yourself up for failure here, but Magik does trust her, and as she states in this issue, that she doesn't want to be connected to Limbo anymore. This is a place of pain and suffering for her. This is a place that literally tortured her for what I believe, if I remember correctly from that 4-issue miniseries, she was trapped in Limbo for about roughly 7 years, even though on Earth only a few scant seconds had passed between the time that she was teleported into Limbo and the time that she actually returned. But for her, that was a whole 7 years. So imagine that that's probably scarred her in some way, and she doesn't want to be a part of that anymore. She doesn't want to be connected to it anymore. You can tell that even when she returns to Limbo in this issue, she's kind of high-key annoyed by a lot of the things that are going on there, even though she's very familiar with them. It's like they say, familiarity can often breed contempt. And that's what's happened here. She has become familiar with Limbo. I mean, she's even become the Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo as well, and you would imagine, having been there for so long, she doesn't like the place anymore. And all it does when she looks at it is remind her of all the things that she suffered. All of that aside, whether or not Madelyne Pryor is right or wrong for the throne of Limbo remains to be seen, but I could think of far worse people to be in charge of Limbo, namely characters like Belasco. Another worse candidate would be the character Sim, who is trying to wrest the throne away from Magik, interrupting the ceremony that Madelyne and Magik were going to have to solidify the transference of power. Now, before all this happened, they did sign a contract. They put a contract in place that would set terms as to the agreement of the transference of power, but we don't know what those terms are. They haven't been stated out loud, but something tells me we'll eventually see, what they are. There is definitely loopholes in this, as Magik even states earlier in the comic that, Hell and Limbo specifically is all about the fine print. So I'm pretty sure both characters put little things in there, little loopholes to protect themselves should things not go the way that they want, but we just don't know what they are right now. But getting back to Sim has been leveled up. He's not the same demon that Magik is familiar with anymore. He's more powerful than he's ever been in the history of Marvel Comics, and when he attacks her with his newly enchanted weapon that he very likely got from Belasco, it shatters Illyana's soul sword. Now the real question is, how bad is this for Illyana? Because here's the thing about the soul sword that you may or may not know. The soul sword is literally comprised of a part of Illyana's soul. It is a powerful magical weapon just in and of itself, and it amplifies her power and her ability to wield magic. Now that it's been destroyed, it doesn't necessarily kill her, but it does make me wonder if a small part of her was destroyed. Because when we see the soul sword shattered, you can tell that she's very clearly shaken, not just because no one's ever really done this to her before, but because you can tell that a part of her is very likely gone away. That said, she's still able to wield her mutant abilities to create portals, but for whatever reason, when they do try to escape from Sim, they don't end up going back to Krakoa. They just wind up in another area of Limbo. Now, as to what's going to happen from here, they're going to have to find a way to bust out of Limbo and get back to Krakoa, but first and foremost, Illyana's going to have to figure out how to reconstitute the Soul Sword, and honestly, it may even be just as simple as her just reforging it. I mean, it's something that she's done before, she's created it before, it's probably not permanently gone. I would very seriously doubt that it is. It's a huge staple of her character. But as for where they go next, Illyana's likely going to end up relying on familiar faces. Who those might be, I'm pretty sure if you go back to that Magik, Storm, and Illyana number 1 through 4 series, you will probably see some of them, but I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of the faces that we saw in that series make some kind of a return. We already saw that Cat is back in the story. We've seen other characters alluded to as well, so I definitely think we'll wind up seeing a lot more of them as this goes on. Now, the other thing that comes up here is the story of the Goblin. Now, this story is basically the blueprint for how Illyana escaped from Limbo, but it's also seemingly the blueprint for what she's doing now. If you look at a lot of the parallels in the story that she read back when she was a child, this seems to have planted the seed. She even says as much in the flashback of this story, where it stated that she kept the story a secret because if Belasco found out she was reading it, he would very likely keep her from coming back to the library. Something he only allowed her to do because he was pretty sure she wouldn't learn anything of value that would help her escape. And we discover that the same goblin that she's reading about in the story actually exists in Limbo for real and has been pinning and changing the story that she's been reading every time she puts it away. This goblin has changed the story to fit something that's going to happen in the future, and as we see, there are parallels between the goblin's companions. The companions are very eerily similar to the companions that she has right now. One that is like Wolfsbane, another that is like Madelyne Pryor, and another who is just like Mirage. I feel like Illyana, as the story goes on, she's going to start recalling parts of this tale, and that is what's going to help her escape from Limbo this time, and hopefully stop Belasco once and for all. It's also very likely why she was so willing to trust Madelyne Pryor and all this without even trying to hear anything anyone else had to say, even saying at one point that saying that you don't like this plan is not going to make me stop doing what I'm about to do. You're just wasting your time. The reason why she is so adamant about following all this through is because of that story. Now, who this goblin really is, it's hard to say. This goblin kind of looks the way Magik would look if they were a goblin. Maybe this is a part of Illyana that is somehow separate from her in Limbo. There's even a mention later on in this book about hope, like having hope within her. Maybe this is the personification of that. I don't know. Like I said, it's a huge reach, but honestly, I've seen crazier shit happen. But anyways, that's everything I want to talk about with New Mutants number 25. This book was awesome. I feel like a lot of the different writers who have been kind of going back and, picking up plot threads and pieces from, X-Men stories of yesteryear, Vita, I think, has done it in the most, I would say the most unconventional way that works really well. Like, they could easily have just said, oh no, this is literally just straight up sequel, blah, 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 blah. But I feel like Vita has probably been one of the better X-Men writers as of late that has been able to take a lot of those older stories, call back to them in ways that are really clever and creative, but also do it in a way that it actually works and it feels like a natural progression for where all this is going. Like, even with the more recent story that they pinned with the Shadow King, like, that was something that I thought was very well handled, and I feel like we're gonna get more of the same, with this in regards to going back and addressing the characters of Magik as well as Madelyne Pryor, and maybe doing these characters some kind of a service and putting these characters in a better place than when we found them. But anyways, let me know what you thought about New Mutants number 25. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.